This episode of the Better Every Shift podcast is sponsored by MagnaGrip. Eliminate diesel exhaust fumes from inside the fire station with a MagnaGrip exhaust removal system. Learn more at magnagrip.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Better Every Shift podcast. My name is Aaron Zamzo. I'll be your host, like it or not. They still have me in this seat, and I have the best seat in the house because week in and week out, I get to talk to some of the most influential, most inspirational and motivational and just intelligent people in the fire service. And today is really no exception. We have the great honor of having Chief Brian Fennessy back with us again from Orange County Fire Authority. Chief has been through a lot. It's great to see you back again. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for being here, buddy.
Great to see you. I don't know about that intelligent thing, but hey, man, I'll do my best.
Between the two of us, I would have, I'd pick you. My old man said, Aaron, you got a room temperature IQ and not very much athletic ability. So you got to figure out how to communicate and you better have good friends. So I do have good friends.
I love it.
I'm glad to say that you're one of them and
Likewise.
Being a colleague, you're a mentor of mine. You've been through a lot this last year. Even the last couple months. Again, you're the fire chief of the Orange County Fire Authority in California, and you guys have had a lot of devastation there in that state. You are kind of in the forefront. You've been a spokesperson for the fire service out in California. You've been on 60 Minutes, and we're going to show we're going to have a link in our show notes about your appearance there on 60 Minutes, but which you did, honestly, Chief. It was a tremendous, I just watched the piece before to prep, and I mean, you could just see the emotion in your eyes and in your voice, and you and Chief Maroney as you went through and discussed everything that you were seeing. And so first things first, how are you guys doing out there? How are you personally? How's your team and everyone else around that area? Kind of give us a recap of where we're at.
Well, and I appreciate that, Sam. You've been a great friend, and you give me a lot more credit, I think, than I deserve. I've learned as probably as much from you as you from me. So no, I appreciate these opportunities. It's been it's been nonstop. Gosh, probably for the better part of this last year. I mean, we went, from big fires here in the county where we lost, hundreds of homes, and back in August, September, and so did many of our neighbors. And man, the rain never came. We went 8 months, and then January 7th, boom, we're off again, and we had the fires here in LA. And as bad as they were, I tell people we're actually pretty lucky because the winds were blowing as strong as they were in LA, down here in San Bernardino, Riverside, San Diego, Ventura, and man, we didn't have the ignitions, that they got in LA. Thank goodness. We could it made it obviously, I think, better for the county and the city of Los Angeles in that there were a lot more resources. The competition for resources weren't nearly as bad as they could have been.
Yeah.
But then as soon as the fires stopped, meant our first rain. We don't get much rain, and it's raining today. And, so we immediately go to swift water rescue, flood, debris flow,
mud flow. Yeah. Right. Mud collapses. Yeah. And yeah.
We're up staffing, we have additional helicopters on, additional swiftwater rescue teams, the DOC's in service today as I sit here, and it's been that way for about 3 days. So we really haven't gotten a chance to catch up. And so, I worry about later, what manifests itself later in terms of, mental health and those sorts of things. And from experience, when you're fighting fire and you have the kind of losses that you do, that's tough, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're pretty good, I think, at compartmentalizing. And then you're moved on to the next thing, but there hasn't really been a break. We've been less force hiring because we're staffed up pretty good, but we've been requiring people to work overtime, through the fires and now through this, rainy period. They haven't gotten much of a break either. So we're watching closely, but this is what we do, right? Yeah. And some of us, quite frankly, we love this stuff. Not the damage or destruction or harm to people or anything like that, but we're we're kind of adrenaline junkies, and you know, if ever there was a time that service was needed, it's now.
Yeah.
So,
We do lose track of ourselves and all that. We're you know, I look at us like police and fire, man. We would run across the street if someone's wielding a gun or a building's on fire to save someone we don't even know. But we are very hesitant on taking time to save ourselves in some
yeah,
cases, right? And so, you know, like you were saying, the other side of this that we don't talk about a lot is the mental health, and we'll probably address that a little bit further down in the interview. But I think if you watch that 60 Minutes, and like I said, I was watching it. You're in the helicopter, right? And I think you were flying over the Palisades fire, right?
we flew both, so I'm not sure which one they used. We flew Eaton and Palisades that day.
Okay, because I remember you saying at one point going, "Whoa," and your voice changed, and you went, "It's all gone." You couldn't get a bearing of where you were. Take us through that a little bit, right?
I've had it in Palisades. Well, you know what? I mean, been a firefighter for 47 years. I started in with the Forest Service back in 1978 there on the Angeles. I grew up in Altadena, you know, about 3 blocks from Eaton Canyon. Me and my friends, I mean, we're in and out of Eaton Canyon and all the front country canyons our whole childhood, right? I mean, spent a lot of time there. Been a lot of fires in there. You know, last one was in '93, the Kinaloa fire, and so we've seen this before. At least in my experience, you see fires will get a block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks maybe into a community. And San Diego certainly took out big parts of communities, but nothing like this. I mean, nothing like this, where you're just driving and driving and driving. And in that morning, you know, when the wind picked up into the next morning, everywhere you looked, you know, the structures were on fire. Mm-hmm. And to be miles, you know, from the WUI is, you know, I got a call, and I think I talked a little bit about it in the 60 Minutes piece, but from my brother who still lives in West Altadena, and a close friend, and you know,
Tony,
they called
right?
me about
friend Tony.
Yeah, they called me, you know, about, I don't know, 10, 11 that night. Says, "Hey, listen, that fire in Eaton Canyon, should I be worried?" I'm like, "Are you crazy? That fire is so far away from you. Do you know how many homes it would have to burn through to get to you? No, you're fine. Go to bed." Not, I mean, man, 2, 3 in the morning, he's calling, going, "Hey, man, I'm going to have to leave." I'm like, "Leave where?" He goes, "Home, man. The fire's." I said, "What fire?" He says, "Well, the Eaton fire." I said, "That fire's in your yard now?" He goes, "Yeah." I'm like, I couldn't get my head wrapped. Are you freaking kidding me? That fire is so far away from Eaton, or your house is so far away from Eaton Canyon. It was mind blowing to imagine that the fire had reached there, and then to see it went even further. Just mind blowing.
Well, I think you and Chief Maroney described it as devil winds, right? It's not, right? It was devil winds. I think one of the things that really kind of gave a great visual was it was a blowtorch.
Yeah.
60, 70 mile per hour blowtorch.
Yeah.
Straight through the houses, right?
Yeah.
Like
fire and the embers. Of course, you know how it is at night. It's much more spectacular because you see those ember showers, right? And in the day, you don't always see that. But I mean, the palm trees next to the pine trees are burning. It was just unimaginable. I mean, I've been to a lot of these, right? But the fire really was unstoppable at that point. You know, people ask, well, when did you finally? Well, when the wind velocity started to decrease, that's when.
Yeah, because you couldn't get helicopters up, right? You couldn't get anything up to really help.
I think it was 27 hours we weren't able to fly aircraft. We flew all day the first day when Palisades took off that first morning. You know, we sent a bunch of stuff by request to the LA city chief, and we do that anyways, you know, engines, helicopters, hand crews. It was the only fire in town, so they were well resourced. The Eaton fire didn't start till that evening. And so, again, those were largely the only 2 fires, but they were pretty well resourced. I'll tell you one of the things, and you mentioned Dr. Lori when we were talking, you know, prior to the show. Mm-hmm. You know, she had an aha moment when she was the fire administrator. And we started talking about, you know, where the wildland stops in the urban, suburban, whatever, the built environment picks up. Yeah. And those fires, like the Marshall Fire, the fire in Lahaina and Maui, you know, this fire, once it leaves the wildland, we're really talking now about an urban conflagration, right? It's two different things. This was no longer a wildland fire once it got into the built community.
Yeah. It's a wildfire at that point, right? It's
Yeah,
just,
I mean, it's an urban, we're getting house to house spread, right? And, in retrospect, a lot of what we're talking about among chiefs and some of the other things is, you know what? We prepare and train for active shooter, for hazmat, for lithium, you name it, right? We don't really train for urban conflagration, house to house spread.
yeah.
And that's something we need to look at. What kind of tactics, you talk to the firefighters afterwards, right? And it's like, well, we found what worked was, we got a hand crew, we had a Type 3 engine, and that 20-person crew in that engine actually made a lot of hay in those neighborhoods because they're removing the fuel at the same time. And so there's a number of things that I think are being learned in these situations that are becoming more, that are occurring more often, that we really need to look at and address. So one of the things that we're going to bring forward to the Fire Scope Board in April is, should we be looking at, because you get engines from up north, from out of state. This may be the first time they've ever experienced that level of house to house, structure to structure spread. We train them for ASI. We train, like I said, we've got all these other things that you train for that you may never encounter. This is something that people might start encountering more, and maybe we ought to be developing, some training on how to deal with that when you show up and you're in those kind of conditions.
Yeah.
Some of the health things, Zam, I mean, we're just finding, we just had a bunch of people go through blood draws. We're involved in a lot of cancer research with universities, with labor and others. And because the firefighters were in that structure smoke, I mean, they're so far away from the wildland, man, they're eating structure fire smoke.
Right. Because you have 4, 5, 6 houses at a clip that are burning and just, right? Like,
Yeah.
So
And
now you're in the, yeah. So did
there's
they
no
have
respiratory protection? You're in your wildland gear. I mean, you're eating, you wouldn't do that if you went to a structure fire.
No. Right. And so did you get any results back from that yet? Or
We've got some results back, and it's not good. The level of heavy metals and some of the stuff, they're seeing the blood work. So yeah, you're going to be hearing a lot more about it. And I think that's going to be more routine, are these blood draws. But yeah, everybody that's eating that smoke for hours upon hours, they're eating structure fire smoke. This is not that the vegetation smoke is good for you, but man, we know when these homes are burning in the ground, man, that smoke's detrimental to everybody's health. And so it just brings up a whole new deal. The structure to structure built environment, urban conflagration is kind of our new, it's not really new, but it's going to become something we see more often.
Yeah. Well, then you combine that with how many lithium ion batteries are in all those houses.
Right.
Right. So we look at PPE now when we go to wildland, to wildfire, PPE, we need to start really looking at that. The other thing is that no community is immune to this, right? Like it can happen here in Wisconsin, just down the road. There's a town that had, I think 12 engines respond to a grass fire that sure enough consumed 2 houses because of the wind and because of the dry conditions. We're seeing this now, East Coast, West Coast. So what you guys are, I mean, you're in the forefront of this because you've been doing the wildland and now the wildfire. It's you're in the scope of this. But as you said, there's a lot of things we need to learn and then teach other members of the fire service because it's just not a California problem. And so, as you go back and kind of do your after actions on this, I know you're in discussion after discussion after discussion. I know you got together with the California Fire Chiefs Alliance, I believe is what it is, or association.
Yeah. So I serve not only as the chair of Fire Scope, but I'm also the president of the California Fire Chiefs Association, where, well, there's a number of chiefs associations in the state. You've got, League of Cities, they've got a president, you've got the Fire Districts Association, contract counties, there's 6 of us counties in the state that, CAL FIRE provides resources for because we protect the state.
Tribal fire, right?
Tribal fire. And so all these organizations, we've gotten together and created this, Fire Chiefs Leadership Alliance.
I'm sorry.
So that when we're advocating, whether it be for a legislation or whatever it is, if we're all aligned, we really are capturing, the entire fire service by doing that. And we're close partners with, President Brian Rice and the California Professional Firefighters. He and I are both longtime personal friends, but together, between the fire chiefs and labor, we can do a lot together. So there's a legislation that they're pushing for that we support, and vice versa.
Is that the fit for
We're-
purpose
we're-
Wildland or Wildfire Readiness Act?
Well, we're largely focusing more on the state stuff here.
Okay.
Now, personally, certainly, a lot of us are, supporting what Senator Sheehy and Senator Padilla have jointly, introduced nationally, but we're seeing, as you can imagine, the number of bills, wildfire-related bills in the state and in the federal, with those legislators. Some make a lot of sense. Some you kind of scratch your head and go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But there is unbelievable activity that's taking place now. And I know I just was at the Capitol testifying at some hearing, and I imagine I'll be back in Washington to testify on some of the legislation. But that's good. The window of opportunity is open. It's unfortunate this is what maybe caused it, but it is open, and shame on us if we, don't try to, accomplish what we need to make the fire service better.
Yeah. Is there a solution out there? I mean, I know you've talked to a lot of people. I mean, is there a better way we can be operating when it comes to these, resources?
I think so. I mean, tactically, like I say, there's a lot done. We've had enough of these now, right? We're really looking forward to the conversation. We'll push this down to the, Fire Scope Task Force and Ops team and committees, and really look at, are there some things that we can do tactically when we have these home-to-home burning? I mean, we need to address the respiratory, all that stuff. But the big thing here in California right now, and maybe it's the same in other Western states, but we're having some real challenges with the resource ordering system. And I think I shared with you the last time we spoke that, post the 2018 Woolsey fire, the Woolsey was taking place the same time the Camp Fire was up north. But those were really the two large fires. And the after action from the Woolsey lost lots of homes, burned them, into Malibu to the ocean again. And one of the things that was identified was that, hey, Southern California is probably more resource rich than anywhere else, maybe in the world, right? I mean, between my 80 stations and LA County's 180, and LA City, I think, has 108. Ventura's got, between just the 4 agencies, man, we got a lot to bring to the show. And the way the system operates, and did even back then, and still does, is when you order 100 engines, man, in LA County, Orange County, some of these down here, man, we need those engines like within the next hour or two.
Yeah.
The system's not built for that. The system's going to reach out to other counties. It may go to Nick, and you're going to get those 100 engines, but it might be over the course of a day or 2 or 3. It's too late. And so we made a commitment among the other 3 fire chiefs and I, LA City, LA County, and Ventura County, that, hey, this happens again, I'll dump half my county to you. I'll dump 40 engines your way. Just give me a location where you want them. They're on the road in 10 minutes. We can't have that. Of course, our concerns when doing that were, well, you might not get paid. Well, you know what? I don't care about being paid. I do, but at the same time, and this is not just because homes are threatened. No, we're actively losing homes. I will send you what I can, with an understanding that if I break a fire, I may be pulling all or some of mine back, and it kind of works for all of us. And that was kind of we'll use this on a very rare basis.
Yeah.
Man, we've used it a ton. And
more than you probably thought, right?
More than we thought. And that's how we sent to Palisades. When Chief Crowley got in touch with me, he says, got a fire. She showed me a picture, texted me, and I said, well, what do you need? She can send me a couple of strike teams. Boom, they're on the way. Where do you want them? Okay, they're coming. Well, what she has to do too in their system is order another 2, right? Because these are just surge resources that we might pull back. So if you're ordering 50 engines, through this bro deal or chief to chief 1960s
handshake, right? Like,
phone and tell me what you need.
Yeah.
You need to order another 50 in the system because somebody's got to replace those so we can get ours back. This is just, surge. We've done it. I sent them a helicopter, hand crew. We're sending, both myself and LA County and Ventura County, sending lots of resources. Well, somebody's got to reconcile that afterwards.
Yeah.
And that's on Cal Fire or the Forest Service, and they lose their minds because, and rightfully so, because it takes a lot to reconcile that. So the system is not working. IROC is not a system that works when you need speed. Great for tracking resources, great for reimbursement. But man, we have a sincere need of, within an hour or two, we need the resources or we're done.
Yeah.
And so our last fire scope meeting, we had a facilitated 2-day conversation and came up with a document that's called a call to action, and really tried to capture what, our highest priorities are. And right now, Aaron, that's our highest priority, man, is modernizing the system. The mutual aid resources are there, it's robust, but the system is not doing what we need it to do. And so our next meeting, we're going to be going over, we're having a special meeting at the end of this month up in Sacramento, and we're going to start talking, because you got Cal Fire, Cal OES, the Forest Service, they're the ones, those systems are the ones that are managing the resource. I can't even tell you anymore. I used to be able to tell you, well, kind of build on. If we have a fire, it exceeds what we need to do, we place a request in through the regional, and then it goes to here, and it goes to there, and it goes. Dude, I can't even tell you anymore, because we're a contract county. So if it's a state mission, the order goes this way.
Yeah.
If it's Forest Service, it goes this way. If it's local, then it's got to go to Sacramento. And everywhere along the line, man, there's delays, right? I mean,
meanwhile, this stuff is burning out of control, right? Like,
yeah,
you don't have time.
We saw delays this last summer and fall. I mean, Chief Muncie in San Bernardino needs a helicopter. He places a request. Took 9 hours. It's a 15-minute flight. It took 9 hours for us to get the resources.
If you could fly a helicopter, you'd be there, right?
Yeah.
You'd hop in. Yeah.
And so we're like, done. We've told all those 3 agencies, done. If somebody asks us, we're sending. You figure it out after the fact.
Yeah.
Well, you might not get paid. Don't care. And we always get paid, right?
Somehow it just maybe takes a little bit longer,
Well,
but
the community expects it, right? I mean, the citizens expect, they call 911 and we got that we're going to do this, and we're having to do it off the books, and that's just not the way
it's not sustainable by that. I mean, but there's 2 things there. I mean, I think this is, you're calling for technology, right? We know if we can get resource management on board, right? We know where all the resources are. We just have to find and I think that's where technology is going to really help us. I mean, I'm glad, put Muncie on it. He loves that technology.
Oh yeah,
stuff,
no, he's engaged in the conversation too.
Okay.
And you're right. I mean, really comes down to, and this is just me and maybe my opinion, but me, man, I'm not afraid. I'm at that part of my career.
That's why I love talking to you.
What's the worst? What's the worst they can do?
That's why I love it. Yep.
That's why,
Well, and I'm going to put this out there. I believe you should become the U.S. Fire Administration czar, by the way. I'm going to create a whole new thing. And actually, and I don't know, I'd like to have 3 czars.
Yeah.
I'd like to have Lieb on East Coast, you West Coast, and then Dr. Lori can be the chief czar.
Head czar. She's got
head czar. She gets to wear the hat, and we flow in robes. Like, we're going to have competitions for this. But that's why I think that's why you're so valuable to us in the fire services, because you will tell everybody what they maybe don't want to hear, but they need to hear. And so I highly encourage, go for it. Like, this is a great avenue for you to do that.
Well, I think, you look at the agencies again, at least in this state, you got Cal Fire, the Forest Service, and Cal OES, each have their own systems. And I believe that as, the fire service evolved in California, we probably had one system back in the 70s, and then somebody took a stronger role. And then Cal OES through Fire Scope is responsible for the care and maintenance of the, mutual aid system. But everybody's got a hand in it. But it's one or all those 3 agencies that, requests go through, the resource requests. And so should there be one? I mean, as it's become way complicated. There's some dispatch centers, there's some Forest Service dispatch centers here in Southern California that close at 10 or 11 at night, whether you got a fire or not. And if that's the ordering point, we experienced that up on with the fire in Ventura County and the Los Padres earlier this year in 2024. In that case, it took 14 hours to get a helicopter, and or the request to arrive, we just send, right, and figure it out later is kind of our deal. Well, if everybody starts doing that, man, we've really lost control. So I believe even the governor out here, issued an executive order, happened to be coincidentally the last day of our fire scope meeting in early February, where he's, directing Cal OES and Cal Fire in consultation with Fire Scope, federal partners, blah, 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 to look at this system and get it fixed. So I think we have an opportunity here. We're asking for money, in the budget to do those things, but it's got to be fixed because I think the people expect better and they deserve better. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to have this phone a friend dispatch, thing's going to continue. And they get it. They're not happy about it, but they get it.
Well, and even we were talking about, the status of what's going on within, government right now. I mean, there's offices closing and the fire administration is being closed right now. And hopefully if someone's listening to this, it's back open again. But the point being right now, fire is under FEMA. And what I think the fire service is kind of banding together, and this is another example of why, right, Chief? Like, let's find technology that can work in the state of California and then possibly federally to help us get resources, right? So if we're in our own entity, we can maybe work with 911 and police up at a different level of Homeland Security, right? Like, this is why it makes more sense, correct?
Well, and the pieces are, I think, slowly starting to come together. And Dr. Lori, amazing person, period. All the work she did with the IFF. I think she was a paramedic, a firefighter in Memphis. Her time with the USFA. I consider her a very close personal friend and colleague, and we've done a lot of things together. And she's brilliant, and I've never seen anybody work harder. I mean, when you hear that, people go, "Oh yeah, no, everybody." No, she works freaking relentlessly, right? And she's bipartisan. She doesn't play politics. And in fire,
she's got one team, and that's the fire service. Yeah. And she does not care black, red, white, up, down, like, and we just did a great interview with her, with Chief Bayshore, Chief Waldo, and Dr. Lori. You can catch that. We'll leave the link to this as well. And you and I were talking about it. Yeah. About being just that ambassador for things like what you're talking about, right? Like,
amazing.
Putting us all together.
Look at what she started with nearest, right? To get us off of NFIRS, right? NFIRS is something that, the reporting system for, that the structure fire departments largely use. We don't know how many resources are available in this country. So, these fires are going on out here. I'm getting calls from friends, other metro chiefs from the east side of the country in the Midwest saying, "Hey, I'd love to send you 5-10 engines, but there's no process to do that other than EMAC, the Emergency Management Assistance Compact, which is a state-to-state, governor-to-governor request system. And that's not fast. If you've ever been involved in EMAC, that ain't the frickin' way, right?
No.
So others in the West are watching what's going on here in California, and they're seeing that we have, not just as a board of directors of FireScope, we've included over the last, I think, couple of years, partner agencies. These are the other federal agencies. We've got, NWCG represented. We've got NOAA. We've got the Weather Service. We've got all our federal partners, and largely, helping us because they believe too that if we can figure out what that modernization of this resource ordering system is, why can't it apply or start to work national? We talked about a national mutual aid system we have for years. In fact, NMAS was something I think the Southeast was doing. So we're not calling it, we don't have a system, but we need a national mutual aid system.
Yeah.
But like ICS, that was born post the fires in 1970, when FireScope was established in 72 or 73, ICS was developed. Why not, start here and see it spread? Because, we'd love to be able to use a system like that to get resources out, and vice versa. Hurricanes, tornadoes. How does the city of Chicago, request strike teams, and where we're missing out. Yeah, we've got the whole side of the country that wants to help, but we don't have a system where we can tap them.
Well, even
ESF4, right?
right.
You're familiar with ESF4, right?
Yeah, yeah.
FEMA, I mean, the Forest Service is responsible for the mobilization of fire resources. They do a great job with the green stuff, and the federal partners, they won't even enter this stuff, hazmat and all these other things, into IROC. It's just narrowly focused on wildland fire.
Wildfire, yeah. And you're right, because there's so many different emergencies that we're too reactive, and if we can use this to start to think more proactively at something that happens in Chicago, how do we get the right resources? Right, I'm in Madison. How can we
Yeah,
get 3 rigs from Madison down to the
yeah,
Chicago area to help out after a tornado or a flood,
right.
or right, like, and I think this is just confirming that we need to be put up into our own kind of branch within Homeland Security, and this is a perfect time to do it. And you're one of the perfect people. You're going to be one of my czars if I get any say whatsoever.
It's funny.
Yeah, I'll just be a spokesperson. I'll just have you guys, you and Dr. Lori and Lieb, and there's a lot of smart people, Wolford, and
Or,
all these people are very smart, and I'm glad you guys are fighting for us. And I don't think the rest of the fire service understands how vocal you guys have been with legislature, with the different organizations. As you've gone through your whole career, you just keep you do a very good job of building these relationships. Take me through that a little bit. Like, where does that mindset for you kind of start? And what relationships do you think we really need to still harbor within the fire service?
yeah, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Been around this long, I guess that's kind of what happens along the way, right? But I think, folks that, I mean, sincerely and genuinely love the fire service, like yourself, me, and so many others, you just make a lot of friends along the way, right? And I mean, there's so many people in positions or that have been in positions that, I served on hotshot crews with. Then we just laugh. It's like, dude, I can't believe you're like the forest FMO. They go, I can't believe you're the fire chief. I mean, none of us really know, none of us ever envisioned, I think, being in positions like this of influence, right? But you look around, it's like, man, everybody's gotten promoted and gotten to these places, and you've had these relationships, right? And you're introduced to new people, and you run into them at conferences. It just kind of builds. And I think the question I've gotten, I don't want to say a lot of, but most is, well, you're a local government. You're a metropolitan fire chief, but you're a local. Why do you care about the DOI and the Forest Service staffing this and that? It's like, well, because if they can't, right, if they don't have the ability to do it, who's going to make that up? We in the state. And, of course we're going to step up, but that means more force hiring, more stations that are empty for longer until we get them backfilled. It's a strain on all firefighters, the mental health stuff, but it's one of these things. It's to our advantage to make sure that you're compensated as you should be, benefit as you should be, and your agency is fully staffed. The continuing resolution, I'm hearing, from guys like Tim Casperson with the Hotshot Wake Up, and those places follow them pretty closely because they're tracking this stuff. And it sounds like, things are progressing. Now the item goes to the Senate, and hopefully the votes are there. But I mean, I've always, whether it's been a hotshot crew, an engine crew with a city, or, I mean, as a chief and those sorts of things, man, the people, right? It's easy to say, well, our people are first, blah, blah, blah. Well, either they are or they aren't. A lot of people will say that, but you see differently, depending on what it is. And, we talked a little bit about U.S. Senator Tim Sheehy out of Montana. He's a former, SEAL team leader. He built with his brother Bridger Aerospace. But this is a guy that cares about his people. You're a guy that care about your people. I'm a guy that genuinely cares about our people. I can't sit here and tell you that the Forest Service leadership does that. I mean, I think they care, but man, you gotta compensate your people fairly. You've got, you talk to folks with the Forest Service deal, they're not looking to be compensated like a county firefighter necessarily or somebody else, but fairly. It's so low, it's embarrassing, and they deserve better. They have families too. And so if some of us that have a platform don't speak up, shame on us.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
Breathing in diesel exhaust fumes is like walking into a fire without a mask. Protect yourself with MagnaGrip, the easiest, most reliable exhaust removal system that features a true 100% seal to eliminate diesel exhaust fumes in a snap. Visit magnagrip.com to download MagnaGrip's free grant guide with expert tips to solidify a grant for essential safety equipment, such as MagnaGrip's exhaust removal systems. That's magnagrip.com to download the free guide.
I agree 100%. I mean, I feel very fortunate to even be able to talk to people like yourself, and that's why I like to bring these things up. Like as you were saying, if you care for your people, you realize my people need this. Well, this is who I need to talk to get that done. Before you know it, you're almost up to the federal level, and I mean, you've been on 60 Minutes a couple times. One time, I think you might have gotten yourself a little hot water, right? But you don't care. It's about your people, right?
Yeah. The first time it was, the bureaucracy. It was funny because it was supposed to be a feel-good story, right? They were coming to follow the QRF, and just by chance, I don't know if you know how 60 Minutes operates, but they give you about a week, maybe, right? I mean, total to build a story. They may visit you for 2 or 3 days, and then they grab B-roll from everywhere. And their vetting process is unbelievable. I mean, they have attorneys. They have anything you said or did, they are fact-checking. Not once, not twice, but you better provide validation because that's it's the gold series.
They're the creme de la creme when it comes to like, hey, this is the story. Yeah.
Well, and it was during the big fires, in California, the Dixie and the Caldor and those sorts of things, and they followed us up to Tahoe. Right, the Caldor fire was burning down into the town, so it was perfect. Well, they got screwed with, man, the production, and the gal who was the executive producer, little tiny thing from New York, man, she was something else. She was like, hey, don't you know we're New York? I mean, she's a total New Yorker. And quite frankly, they started getting jerked around by, the agencies that were managing the fire. I mean, really jerked around, and it pissed them off. And that was probably the wrong thing to do. And as much as I was, calling those agencies directors, saying, hey, you need to get somebody out here, man, the fire might send a fire information officer, some trainee. I mean, that was not the level of this. And they saw with their own eyes what we all know, kind of behind the scenes, the dirty laundry. I mean, they saw it firsthand and experienced it. And she told me, she says, look, this was supposed to be a feel-good story, and it still will be, but we have to pivot here because we've seen some things that are just outrageous. And so, it was not flattering for a few of the agencies in here, but it did cause change.
That's the cool part, right?
Yeah, I mean, incident management teams, whether you're a state, Cal Fire, or feds, they meet now together before the season. There's a lot of things that cause change. So I think it was worth it in the end. I might have been villainized a little bit, but I didn't do anything. They saw with their own eyes, what we all knew existed for decades.
If you tell the truth, you never have to lie.
That was it.
Right. And if you call a spade, and I think that's really what we need to do to get better as a fire service, right? Like we all got to look in the mirror, and we got to look at why these agencies aren't talking to each other. And now that they are, how can we make them a little more efficient? How can we make them better? And we've touched on a lot of things. We touched on resource management. We talked on, how you guys are kind of overcoming that gap right now. The other side of this we talked about is the emotional side that it's playing on our firefighters. And off camera, you and I were talking about, we are horrible marketers in the fire service. Right? Like if you look at why we're having problems with recruitment, it's because we just used to open the door and say you, and you. And now, right, there's a lot more people that are choosing other professions. We kind of don't know what we do. But even marketing within ourselves to take care of each other, right? Like, so the emotional side of these fires, I mean, you could see it when you were in your 60 Minutes, just about, your brother was affected. Your good friend, Tony, was affected. And you could see it in your description of seeing neighborhoods you grew up in just devastated. So, I mean, talk about that a little bit. I mean, what kind of things are you seeing from your crews? And you had said you got some feelers out to make sure people are being taken care of there.
Well, yeah, I mean, every house I grew up in, was destroyed. Every school, that I attended, with the exception of my high school, was destroyed. And I was back last weekend to help my brother out. His house and his neighbor, the only ones in this, what they're calling the vast wasteland. And so when you go to the backyard or front yard, as far as you can see, it's just destruction. And a lot of the cleanup, the EPA has done their thing or whatever, but a lot of the removal of the debris has not really happened yet. So it's like everything's still frozen, in time.
Yeah. Is one of those houses the one you saved with the milk and beer, by the way?
It is.
Is it?
It is. Well, his neighbor, right? I mean, by the time I got there, right, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe his house and his neighbor's house are still standing, because the house next to him is going like a bomb, right?
Is that so? You're there and it's still inferno, right?
Oh,
like
dude,
it's still,
it's like going, and the house on the other side of his neighbor's going like a bomb. His garage, detached garage, going like a bomb, and every house on the other side of the street is going. I mean, you can hear, propane containers going off. You can hear ammunition, going off, and I'm like, wow, his house is here, but man, it's gonna catch. Man, his house and the other house is gonna catch fire here soon, right? I mean, it was remarkable that it was on. And so really all I could do is prep. It's like, well, I'm here. I might as well prep these structures, and, just kind of fell back on the training and removing, the wooden fences. I carry, my freaking unmarked, Tahoe, man. I got SCBA. I got all the stuff, right?
yeah.
I'm ready to go. I break out a Halligan, and, I got the yellow shirt and a helmet on, and some tearing down fences and all that other stuff to try to prep the, history. I had to work on the neighbors, because if the neighbors goes, my brother's house goes. And,
Yeah.
I had to force entry into the neighbor's
Well, you
house.
see the gas line, like the meter was starting to be impinged upon, right? Like,
between the house that was fully involved next to his neighbor's house, there's a pathway, right? But there's a wooden fence there too. Well, that wooden fence is catched. I gotta get the wooden fence down. Well, the windows on the other side, one failed, but it was a double pane window. Had it gotten through that, the curtains on the inside, that house would have been gone. Then my brother's house would have been gone. But down at the bottom, there's a gas meter, and there's a pile of combustibles there that are on fire. You know how it is, man. You're trying to get in, it's hot. You're trying to get in and pull it, and then you're back out, and it's like, God, I need something wet. And of course, the water wasn't going. I said, everybody's got water in their house, right? Drinking water. So I forced.
I'm from Wisconsin. We got beer. For
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Right.
So I forced entry into his neighbor's house in the front door, which is a little weird, right? And I'm going through this person's house, and I can't find anything. There's no water. There's no cases. Well, let me check the refrigerator, and sure enough, there was, like a gallon or half gallon of milk and a couple of beers or whatever. So I freaking take them out and duck in, and and then try to stir, and then duck in and pour some more, and it worked. So both those houses, when I drove away, I didn't know that they'd still survive. I felt like, well, I've done enough. There's nothing I can do. Should these houses catch, there's nothing I can do. And they ended up surviving. So, to a degree, I think I helped, but I think a lot of luck was involved too.
Yeah.
Quite honestly.
Well, wildfire beer, I think, is going to be a pretty famous in California at some point.
I was telling the 60, because I know Bill Whitaker from the last time they were down or whatever. So we're just BSing as we're driving, right? And so I'm telling him this story, and he's just roaring. He thinks it's hilarious, right? I didn't expect him to bring that up. So
it was great,
Oh, really? So you're going to bring that up? Of all the things we talked about, that's what you're.
Yeah. Well, beer's a great segue into the mental health stuff too, right? Because you acted fast, and I think you guys you're trying to do that as an organization too. Is just look after your members. Yeah. I think that's the other thing we don't talk about, we don't think about, we don't actually market to the outside population is, all these firefighters had to work on the front lines. Your houses that you grew up in, gone. Neighbors, friends, brother, some of your firefighters lost their houses.
Yeah.
And they got to go back to work, and right. And so that it takes a tremendous toll mentally. And it's just something that we like you were saying, you got to have resources for that as well. Right. Like, so do you guys share resources from department to department after incidents like this?
Yeah, we do. The big LA County is probably the biggest one that's probably shared the most. We've got a pretty robust peer, support program, and we've got the Counseling Team International, that's not just no cost. I mean, we pay for it, but anybody can access it, family members, on and on and on. We've chaplain program. I mean, we're pretty robust. LA County's got a huge peer support program, and so there's a lot of exchange like that. And speaking just for my agency, I mean, there was a lot going on this last fire season, and then we had our hand crew bus rollover. The crew buggy rolled over, and we had
yes.
8 transported, 2 that are still not in good shape, and we've had a line of duty death, and it seems like every month we're dealing with some other tragedy. And I think some of us have been doing this a long time. We're get pretty good at compartmentalizing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, put it over here, let's move forward. I'll deal with it later, and blah blah blah. What impresses me most about the generations that are starting in the fire service and that exist is they don't seem to be concerned about the stigma, not nearly as much. People are seeking and they're getting quality care, and I'm provided an update periodically on how many people. I don't get names or anything like that, but all of the things that people are being seen for, and it just blows me away. That people, I'm so pleased that firefighters seem to reach out when they need the help, because compartmentalizing, I think, is again, I think a technique or something that it's a survival mechanism, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't encourage people to compartmentalize like I have over my career.
Yeah.
They can offload this thing. I've been divorced, and I mean all the things that happen when you're doing that. But I couldn't be more pleased that people are actually getting the help that they need. We talked a little bit, about.
Yeah, because I was going to ask how are you? Like, how do you handle that too? Like you're saying, like there's an old school part of you,
Yeah.
but you're also embracing kind of the newer side of that. Yeah. So
Probably not well. What I tell people is don't use me as an example. I mean, we recently had a line of duty death, and I had to go make the family notifications, and this one was extraordinarily. It's always extraordinarily hard, but this one was different. It was very difficult, and but you're the chief, so you've got to show. You can show emotion and those sorts of things, but at the same time, people are looking to you to lead and to be strong and those sorts of things. So you have to kind of pick your times. For me, sometimes it's in the car when nobody's around. That's maybe when I have my breakdown, and then I move on, right?
Yeah.
But again, I don't know that that's the healthiest. I'm kind of a workaholic. I love our profession, and I love to work, but that's probably not the healthiest either.
yeah. Well, everything in balance, right? Like, I mean, you stay fit, you take care of yourself. I mean, you watch what you eat pretty much for the most part. There's some things I could help you with a little bit on that part, but everybody's like that, right? Like we all have our things, but I mean, you do take care of yourself, and you have over the years. That's all part of this package, right? Like everybody kind of deals with stuff differently,
And now it's more now I find myself as Ben, I have to do that, because I want to keep working, right? And I'm, at an age where, hey man, if I'm going to be able to keep working, I gotta be freaking hell. There's people my age, man, that are hobbling around and this and that, man. I've gotta, if I want to continue to do this, it's directly tied. And if I stop, man, I probably will have to retire at some point because, my back or my shoulder, something's going to freaking happen.
Yeah.
And I think that, there's still more to contribute. And I like where we are right now, kind of nationally. We're talking about the standalone fire agency. I mean, there's change in the works. Some of it, it's not helpful change, I think, that we're seeing out there, but within the fire service, I think we're going to see some really amazing things here in the next 3 to 5 years. And man, I want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
To me, it's exciting,
Well, if you're going to be the czar, you got to learn to take care of yourself, Chief. So you might have to hire me as your side trainer.
Yeah, man.
Right? I'll be the fire service fitness instructor or drill sergeant, I would prefer for the fire, but
That's great.
we'll work on that.
We'll get you you get you a czar assistant hat too, right?
I'd like, one of the old drill instructor ones, with the real brim down here. I mean, I just have to shave my head a little bit
I
more, but
love it.
but I think there's always room for growth, right? You've been in for 48 years. It sounds like that's one thing that you're still trying to work on, right? Like this
Yeah,
is where the younger generation is maybe helping you see the light.
totally. I mean, I just love firefighters, right? And you've got to, right? And I mean, it's just I feel blessed to have been able to find something that I wasn't looking for at age 18 that is, like I say, I'm kind of surprised myself. I never thought a knuckle dragger, juvenile delinquent would end up here having this conversation with you. But
Here you are about to be the next fire czar, possibly too. I mean, there's so
I
many.
don't think I can even
things.
spell czar. Was that like ZAR or something?
CZAR, I think, is how we're going to spell it, or just ZAR, because we like to simplify things. You're just going to be the czar, right?
Yeah. I love it. Well, I mean, all joking aside, I believe in what Senator Sheehy and Senator Padilla are proposing. I don't think it's fixable. My experience with the federal wildland fire agencies, having been employed by them and seeing, I think it's one of those things. It's got to be blown up. It's got to be starting over. And I support, Senator Sheehy's vision, and I think it'd be great if you had some time with him too, and he could share that publicly.
Sure. Yeah.
And if I were a wildland firefighter today, there's a lot of anxiety right now, uncertainty with the layoffs and the hiring freezes and all the things that we know. The pay is not good. I think all that's going to pass, and if this vision materializes like a lot of us think it will, I think the wildland firefighters are going to be in a really good place. They're going to be presented well. I mean, any organization, I'll use the Forest Service as an example, where your fire chiefs, your fire leadership is answering to resource management, staff. I mean, that's the way the system is set up, right? So years ago, fire was 11% of the budget, whatever it was, right? Well, over time, as we all know, fire has become the biggest part of those budgets. These are resource agencies that back then could probably manage fire. It wasn't a big deal. Well, when you're, for example, here in California, when the Director of Fire and Aviation Management reports to a regional forester, and the 18 forests that each have a chief, they report to a forest supervisor. The chiefs below them report to district rangers. There's no clear flow. That's not a fire department. And what Senator Sheehy is talking about, and I've shared with him, I said, man, you're talking about creating the biggest fire department in the country. You're talking 18, 19,000 firefighters.
Yeah.
That's a huge endeavor, but it needs to be set up like a fire department. You can't have, your fire leadership, at least at the regional office, maybe they're peers. You got the regional forester and you've got the director of fire, the forest supervisor and the forest fire chief. They're equals, but they don't. And it expands all the way to Washington. The director of fire and aviation in Washington is the boss of largely nobody, right? I mean, it's just, so that all needs to change. Contracting, I mean, the whole thing needs, but it's a complex issue. It goes back to, we talked a little bit about ESF4. Okay, if the Forest Service isn't doing that, this new agency probably has to. So we need people like Dr. Lowry to help in the design and development. I'm helping Senator Sheehy with this, as are a few other fire service leaders in this country. And I think that group's going to grow because many of us strongly believe that now is the opportunity that we have. And we're not doing this for ourselves, but we feel like this is an opportunity for change that we may not see again, that we never thought we'd see, that we don't believe we'll ever see again. And Senator Sheehy is the right guy to lead this charge.
Well, and I appreciate that. Well, we'd love to talk to him. And I think what you're talking about though is it's not just right now. It's to kind of work at the wildland level, but right, that same model though can branch off to so many other aspects of what we do. And if you can get that framework down, right, that's the template for success, for resource sharing, for education sharing, for for actually like policy
Yeah.
and even then taking that back up the chain to say, we need government help on this. We
Yeah.
need, right? And funding can trickle down to the right places then. And
All
it's,
right. And it's my understanding that, the Secretary of Interior and Agriculture are talking. They have 180 days. I don't know where they are on that. To what will it take to move the Forest Service over to the DOI? Well, that's part of it, right? I mean, you've got 5 different DOI agencies, right? Fish and Wildlife, Parks, BLM, BIA, and then you got the Forest Service. And even within the Department of Interior agencies, there's difference in policies and everything. I mean, I understand how it got there. People, well, how'd that ever? Well, you got to go back 50 years, 60
yep.
years, and it got here. So we got to shake that up. And I know that, for example, the Grassroots Wildland Firefighters, who I think is an amazing organization, they've put out a white paper that largely mirrors what the senator wants to do, but they strongly feel the agency would be better fit in the Department of Homeland Security. I don't disagree, and I don't think the senator disagrees, but pretty unlikely at this point, because, man, look what's going on with FEMA. I mean, the Department of Interior seems to be willing to take the Forest Service. This new agency probably needs to at least start or with a department that is interested in doing it. I don't think the DHS has the capacity or interest right now. And so, the senators talked a little bit about that. And, but this is that opportunity, Zam. And I think folks like yourselves and others, man, can be a part of that. There's so many people that can be a part of this.
Well, and I think the entire fire service can be a part of this by just coming together. Dr. Lori had always said one voice. Well, this is really, I think, the opportune time for us as a fire service to say, hey, put us up on a different level. Give us, like you were saying, give us some resources so we can make this a little more streamlined, because we have to be more proactive, because these emergencies, like active shooter you had mentioned, lithium ion batteries, wildfire, wildland fire, hurricanes, floods, as weather continually gets more and more extreme, these are becoming more and more commonplace, and it does not matter. It just happened to hit your coast, unfortunately, but like, I think we owe it to those people that suffered. We owe it to all those firefighters that have sacrificed to make this system better. So when it happens the next time, we're a little better prepared. Right. And I think, and that's why I always love talking to you. And I wanted to bring it all the way back to our very first discussion you had on our first podcast about you come up with the Orange County way, right? Like when you took over that department, it maybe wasn't at a place where your expectations were higher, and you started with leadership. And I see this transferring to this next project too, right? Like you have to bring everybody together. And can you just summarize? I think you had 2 or 3 things that you really did that made a really pivotal impact on your organization. And I just think those are great points to transfer to everybody also.
Well, I mean, you and I've talked about this before. It starts with the culture, right? And coming here, I mean, every organization has its own culture, big, small, everything in between. And as the new person here coming from 30 years with the city of San Diego, I understood that culture was a part of it. And over time, we were able to change that culture to something more mission driven and positive and those sorts of things. Coming here, very different culture. And I love the way you said that. It was very diplomatic. It needed a few changes.
Just needed some tweaks. Wasn't up to your expectations.
Tweaks, right? And some like-minded people that believed in that as well. And it took a lot of time to get out and meet with lots and lots of people and have the discussions. But when you did, you see a lot of nodding heads go, yeah, that was. Then you've got the skeptics and the cynics, and I'm kind of in that camp a little bit too. I believe it when I see it and this and that. I'm kind of an early adopter, but I'm also a realist, right? Mm-hmm. And over time we saw that. And then, the layer of chief officers below me, wanted to own this thing, and it had to be theirs. It couldn't be the fire chiefs, right? I mean, it had to be something that they invested in and believed in. And along with the turnover that's going on, we're hiring 100 firefighters a year, and we've got people retiring. And so 7 years in now, shoot, man, probably 60% of the organization are people that I hired, since I've been here. And I think of the 70, 80 chief officers we have in the organization, I think only 2 or 3 were chief officers when I got here. So, but they own this. It wasn't something I necessarily did. To your point, the crossover, again, in talking with Senator Sheehy and others, he understands, him coming from the military, the SEAL community, the culture is important. And for him, his people are important. For me, my people are important. And however this new agency, shakes out, the culture has to be built around, being there for our people and not just saying it and communicating. And that's, even as large as it is, the military is larger. They found a way to communicate intent and all of those other things. We can certainly, do the same thing. But we got to get that culture. I think it's an opportune time because there is a lot of interest and excitement by some of the wildland firefighters. Hopefully that becomes more of them about this change. That, I mean, simple things, right? They're not even firefighters. Forestry aides and techs and range this and supervisory, just the nomenclature. These are firefighters.
Yeah.
Let's acknowledge them as firefighters and fit that definition, right? And if they do, does that open up the door then for organizations like the IFF to represent them? If they meet the firefighter, well, that is one strong, that's a great organization led by, President Kelly and Frank Lima and some of these guys. Man, what an organization. Now, if you've got people like them advocating for this new agency, I think things are gonna come.
Snowball. Yeah.
But the culture has to start, being about its people first.
Yeah.
And it's not. I'll give you one last one. So, talking with some of the staff and we're identifying some key, leaders, fire service leaders to maybe assist with this program. One of the things that I think is a must is we got to have industry involved. When I say that, I'm largely talking about the aviation community. You've got, air tanker, companies, you've got, helicopter company, and it just blows my mind that you wouldn't get those people in a room every year and talk about, okay, what went well this year and what didn't go so well? What are the things we need to change? And man, everything's done in a silo. The new contract comes out and whoever the geniuses that are in the government have decided now you need to have this gadget on your helicopter and you got to do this. And you're costing them money without any input. If you sit down and talk to those people, they would tell you what's needed. And where I'm going with this is the senator just introduced some legislation yesterday or the day before about standards, basically a standards of cover, getting to wildfires within 30 minutes of, an ignition, not necessarily to suppress, that would be great, but just to, so if you did
get
that,
eyes on it, right? You need to get eyes on it. You know where it's going, where can you start to be preventative and or proactive with it.
Well, there's an organization called the United Aviation Firefighters Association, UAFA. And Paul Peterson is the CEO and runs that. In fact, Paul would be a guy you'd want to talk to as well. He's former BLM director out of Nevada, retired, has been 2 years running this organization. He tells me, man, I was blind as a government employee to what I'm seeing now. And they've done largely their own standards of coverage. They've got, I've seen it, the maps with the different tanker bases all over the country, tabs on the types of aircraft and how they can get to where they can. It gets down to the helicopter level. And so it's a great model to determine, okay, if 30 minutes, let's say 30 minutes, 90% of the time is our measure, our metric. Well, then you only need to go look at, well, how many air tankers do we have at these bases? What do we need in terms of resources? I bet it's double the air tankers, maybe more than we have now. Well, that leads then to, a funding discussion, right? Because you can't just say we need to double it. Well, we'll double it based on what? Well, I just know we need more.
Yeah.
No, we need
to support it, right?
To know that if this is what you want, this is what it's going to take to do. Well, then this is what it's going to cost, to do that. And the contract issues, right?
But we do that structurally already.
We do.
Right. And so why are we not? Because, and then we can mold the two, because now you're going to have structure and wildland, right? Wildfire, wildland. How do we better? And then, and I'm not to cut you off, but then you get the other agent, you get the 911 agencies in there, you get the police agencies in there, because you got to work on evacuation routes, right? But we need to come together. And I think that's why get us out of FEMA, bring us up a step,
Yep.
bring all this together and start this process, right?
got it.
Unified command, right? Didn't we say that a lot?
Because it affects the states and locals too. They got to be at the table, right? I mean, yeah, I mean, eventually you get around to the ground, you know, the engine. What I'm hearing is the Forest Service doesn't even know how many freaking engines they have, how many people they have. I mean, they've gotten, you know, where are these people? And do you set up a response system once you have metrics based on you erase all the borders? What does that look like?
Yeah.
How many more do you need? And those sorts of things. But these are things that on the contracting side, you know, the Forest Service will tell you, hey, we have long-term contracts with the air tanker providers. Well, no, you don't. You have one-year contracts with renewables. You know, those companies, if they're looking to upgrade, say they want to get into the night space, so big helicopter operators, you got to configure the aircraft. You got to buy goggles. You've got to do some things. When you go to the bank, you got to hire more people so you can fly at night. You go to the bank looking for money. The bank's not going to give you any loans. All you can show is you got a 150-day contract.
Yeah, right. You need
next year's uncertain.
Yeah, 5-year contracts, 3-year contracts, so they can build, they could grow along with the threats. Right?
Industry is close. They know what we need, and they are amazing partners. But even when I was with the you know, federal wildland agencies, there was this culture, even back in the late 70s, 80s, and into the 90s. I'm sure it exists still. Is that, man, you got to watch out for those contractors, man. They're out to freaking beat you. You know, they're going to try to. And hey, listen, like anything else, yeah, there's probably a small percentage that you maybe need to watch, but by and large. And these are our partners. They're not all like that. And so when you grow up in a culture of that, and I did, and I found it wasn't that at all, you know, and watch the, oh, they're going to try to do this. That didn't happen. We need to involve industry. And so this is that, I'm excited. As I sit here and talk about it, I get all excited because I think this is an opportunity the country may not ever see again if we don't.
No. Well, and I'm excited to have another conversation with you post like 6, 7, 8 months down the road, because I think some of this stuff we're at the precipice of it. We're at the point where this is going to start rolling, I think, more in our direction. And it's thanks to people like yourselves and Dr. Lori and IEFF, IEFC, all working together, you know, and right, like just as you put your people first and you put that culture together at Orange County, I think the other good thing that you did is you marketed it. And that's kind of my goal with this program, is to market all these good things that are going on behind the scenes so people can get behind them. And, you know, I don't know, hopefully people listening, I hope you got more people on Czar Fennessy team right now after this, my friend, because it's great. Because I mean, I could talk to you for hours, and I truly appreciate just your insights. And I gotta end it though. I can't just stop you cold turkey though. I have to ask you, you know, there's a lot of stuff that I know you continually work and develop on, but you know, the question and bringing it back to the focus of the program is how, you know, better every shift. I mean, Chief, what are you doing every day to get better?
Yeah, you know what? I'm finding myself, you know, doing a lot more research and reading that the issues today, God, they're all over, right? It's like that inbox exercise, right? With injects all day long with very little time to deal with it, you know, getting, you know, 150, 200 email a day, you know, and again, that sounds like a lot, but probably half of those I don't even have to read, right? They could be whatever. There's probably a percentage of those that, you know, I got to pay attention to. And then there's a smaller percentage that requires some research and some reading, you know, a paper is included, a proposal, this and that. And it's hard to do, right? And so I find myself on the weekends, that's where I kind of push off my reading. So the short answer is, you know, staying engaged and talking with people, attending conferences, engaging with people like Dr. Lori and others, and hearing the federal, the state, the local perspective, from those that are retired, from those that are active. I'm just a curious person anyways, right? I'm just naturally curious and wonder how. I'm that kid that used to break things to see how it, you know, what's inside. I could never really put them back together very well, but you know, want to see what made it tick, right?
Right.
Broken toys around the old house. But I think, you know, that is more important than ever right now. You got legislation coming up the gazoo because of these fires have, you know, really gotten a lot of people exposure. knowing who you're talking with. You're going to go visit with an elected official, state, local, or not, you can about do your own background anymore via Google or some other search engine, but all that requires time. And I think, what's helping me is to do that, to remember that that's important, and to be prepared as best you can. I mean, anymore, I feel like I'm 70 to 80% prepared, and I'd like to be 100%. I mean, there's just not enough time in the day. It has to be any more good enough, which is hard for probably guys like you and I that are kind of perfectionists and want it to be exactly right. It's hard to go, man, I'm going to have to accept 80% on this.
Yeah. Well, and your 80% is someone else's 100. You got to remember that, right? Like, you're harder on yourself than anybody else is. Yeah, I mean, I think that's where you and I bond, is because I look at everything. Well, I should ask this question. I should have done this better, right? But we can't paralyze ourselves by working for 100% in our minds, right?
Well, and we all know people that do, right? It won't be done until it's 100%. And, sometimes you got to tell them, hey man, this is good enough. And then once other people, what I always find too, right, is I think this is perfect, and then toss off for feedback, and it ends up better because, man, people have found things that it's like, man, that is way better. The way you said that was better than the way I said it, or I hadn't thought about that. But kind of, not owning it as much, put it out there, let others, let's own it. People that write that say, hey man, edit this thing. I have no ownership, but it won't hurt my feelings if you do. So you do, and it does hurt their feelings.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay, file that one away. I don't think I'll be doing any editing for those. On the other hand, I don't care, man, edit away. I mean.
Well, I think that's why your culture is good. And that's why you've been successful at building these cultures, is because it's not your culture. It is everyone around you. And you do a great job of bringing in the right resources and people. And, I've watched it for the last 10 years, and ever since we've met in San Diego. And like I said, I appreciate watching you work. And I know that there's going to be big things, hopefully, for you as the unofficial czar, one of the 3 czars that I'm gonna appoint. If I ever
get there's a cool hat that goes with it, right? There's got to be some czar hat.
We're gonna market the crap out of it. We're gonna have you on, Jimmy Kimmel. We're gonna have contests to have votes for that. I mean, that's how we're gonna bring the fire service back again. We're gonna, they can choose the czar's hat for the year. So, hey, Chief, thanks so much for the time. Thanks for the great conversation. I'm just always even more motivated to just continually work. And like you said, try to get better, try to do research. If people get an opportunity, we're going to leave a link to that 60 minutes where you can really see the passion. And anytime you talk about people and the fire service, it comes out. I can just see it in you, like you lighten up. So if anybody's just listening to this podcast, I highly recommend you go to our YouTube channel or go to Fire Rescue One and click on the Better Every Shift, where you can kind of just see Chief. And he looks good. I think you look better at this one than you did the previous one, even though you've been through hell. So you're finding some balance, Chief. I got to admit, you're doing pretty well.
I'm trying, man. But I'm in my office today and everybody else is gone. What does that tell you, right? It's a Friday. It's like, well, but you know what? It's the old lead by example too, right? I mean, you don't think about that, but I mean, that's, when you love an organization, the service you do, what you can. And luckily, I have family that understands that that's kind of the deal. And yeah, I love what we do here, and I always enjoy, speaking with you. We're like-minded in so many ways, and I get all excited. Got me all jacked up.
Now, don't stay in the office too long. Make sure you go take a walk, get your own, personal stuff in, right? Take care of yourself, because I need you around. We need you around as a czar or whatever we're going to have you in. We want to see good things from you. And again, thanks so much, Chief.
Thanks,
and for those listening, if you do have questions for me or for Chief, Better Every Shift at firerescue1.com. Please email us. Please comment. Please share. Really, really share. Rate, review the show. You can, again, go to our Better Every Shift banner and page at firerescue1.com. Chief, so many good things. I think the biggest thing I always take from you is that everything you talk about and everything you do research on comes back to your people. Service to your people, which transfers to better service to the community. And it's you're a sponge for information so you can transfer and be the best version of yourself for your people. And when I hear you talk, I think about the the slogan or the saying that says, "Be curious, not judgmental." And I really think that you epitomize that. And again, thanks for all your insights. And for those listening, be curious, not judgmental. And hope that transfers to you learning something, doing something, and sharing something to make you and those around you better every shift. Thanks for listening, everybody.